A bounty hunter chases a pregnant fugitive through a city dripping with heat and dread. But when the hunter becomes the hunted, the city's oppressive silence screams the cruelest truth. Sao Paulo simmered beneath a relentless sun, its heat pressing down like an unseen weight, crushing the narrow streets and suffocating all breath of relief. In this molten city of glaring inequalities, Camilo lived on the razor's edge of desperation, his soul frayed by debts as heavy as the August air. The concrete jungle felt alive, its walls sweating with grime and whispered secrets, shadows curling like smoke around his cracked footsteps. Camilo worked as a digital bounty hunter, a predator of the overlooked, hunting ghosts through cold screens and whispered notifications. Apps sent him signals in the static heat, faces, names, coordinates. A twisted modern hunt where wealth paid for silence, and the missing were mere currency. His wife, swollen with their unborn child, carried hope he could scarcely afford to nurture. The rent gnawed at their fragile stability, and the fridge was a barren cave. On one stifling morning, the air so thick it clung to skin like damp linen, his phone vibrated, a harsh buzz slicing through the humid stillness. Target Clara, 27 years old, pregnant, last known location, East Zone, reward, RADA 12,000. The message glared at him, bright and merciless in the dim light, its edges seeming to blur as sweat dripped down his temple. He knew Clara once a maid to a ruthless family, now a ghost escaping the chains of abuse. She wasn't wanted by law, but by contracts signed in shadows. A chill uncoiled in Camilo's gut as he looked around his cramped room, the peeling paint curling like dry leaves, the eviction notice tacked to the door, the hollow echo of their empty fridge mocking the silence. Hesitation. A flicker of humanity tried to root itself, but hunger clawed louder. The city outside breathed heat and apathy. He answered only with a nod to no one. His pursuit led him through the labyrinth of the East Zone, a forgotten quarter where the stifling heat warped the fading daylight into sickly orange blooms on cracked sidewalks. The narrow street was deathly quiet, houses draped in shadows that seemed to breathe with mounting tension. A faint scent of cooking oil and mildew tangled in the thick air, a reminder of lives pressed too close together. There was Clara. She emerged from a dimly lit grocery store, her breath ragged, her belly a swollen drum against the fabric. Her eyes flickered like candle flames, flickers of fear and desperation warring beneath tired lids. "Camilo, don't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. The words clung to the air, fragile as the whispered winds that shuffled forgotten leaves along the ground. Tears brimmed and blurred her gaze, tears that mirrored his own fractured resolve. But he said nothing. Silence pressed, a suffocating seal as he reached out, fingers tightening around her arm like iron bands. The temperature dipped, or was it only the sudden cold clawing at his chest? Clara began to convulse, contractions rippling like shudders in the air. "The baby is coming," she gasped, terror folding her words in a shrinking whisper. The street seemed to shrink, walls leaning in, the heat thickening into a palpable weight that pressed every breath into shards. Camilo's pace quickened, the reward depended on her alive. A cruel clause stitched into the contract of survival. As they moved through the suffocating maze of the city, the scent of bitter exhaust and hot tar seeped into their clothes, bleeding into their skin. Each step echoed a countdown, the shadows lengthening, fingers reaching for safety that was slipping through trembling hands like smoke. At the building's entrance, a facade of cold luxury veiling untold secrets. Two men stood like sentinels, their presence a stark contrast to the city's decay. They took Clara without a word, handing Camilo an envelope swollen with promise and despair before closing the heavy door behind them. The doorway swallowed sound, but from within pierced a newborn's cry, a sharp, brief burst against the silence, before it was cut off suddenly. The echo lingered, a cruel sound wave that wrapped around Camilo's chest like a chain tightening in the dark. That night, in the suffocating quiet of their cramped apartment, Camilo spread the cash across a scarred wooden table. The glow from a lone, flickering bulb cast shadows that danced like vultures on the peeling walls. His wife's soft voice broke the tension. "Did you get it?" she asked, eyes searching his face for salvation or ruin. He nodded, silent. The room seemed to pulse with unspoken dread, the fan overhead stirring hot, stagnant air that refused to cool the rising terror. His phone lit up again, cold, relentless. A new notification blinked. Target male, 32 years old, name, Camilo. The oppressive heat closed in, the walls inching closer, shadows bleeding into him. The hunter had become the hunted, the city a living, breathing nightmare reflecting the fracture of his own soul. Dive deep into Sao Paulo's suffocating streets and uncover the sinister hunt where humanity and desperation collide. But beware, in this city, the hunter may vanish into the shadows he once commanded. When eyes vanish without a trace from a drowned man, a forensic student finds himself stalked by a creeping nightmare where reflections reveal more than just faces. Henrique, a dedicated forensic medicine student, entered the medical examiner's office as the coastal city outside was swallowed by a relentless rain. He was no stranger to cold chambers and still bodies, often honored with the detached precision only years of practice afford. Yet this morning, the air was different. Thick, heavy, and laced with an invisible frost that seeped beneath his skin, chilling more than just his bones. The clinical coldness of the chamber, usually sterile and predictable, now felt like a breath held in waiting, an expectant silence pressed tightly against his ears. On the gurney lay the body of a middle-aged man, his skin pale as driftwood, slick with moisture, as if just dredged from the turbulent sea. The faint scent of brine swirled subtly around the edges of the room, blending perversely with the antiseptic sterility. But the detail that cut deepest into Henrique's consciousness were the eye sockets. Vacant voids, hollow and impossibly smooth, as though eyes had been removed long ago, yet the skin remained unmarred. There were no wounds, not a whisper of blood stained the pale flesh. The autopsy report whispered drowning, but it felt as hollow as those empty sockets. Henrique prepared the examination instruments with trembling hands. The metallic glint of his tools seemed suddenly sharper, colder, almost unnerving. 2 flickers from the overhead fluorescent lights fractured the stagnant air like warning pulses. Then, a distant, almost imperceptible ripple of water echoed faintly through the chamber, like a stream out of place. His breath caught, a sudden prickling crawling up his spine. When his eyes darted back to the gurney, the body's head twisted just so, angling slowly until it faced him directly. The moment thickened. Time seemed to fold inward. The sterile white walls warped into shadows that bent closer, leaning in to listen. Henrique's pulse thundered in his ears. His colleagues arrived, chatter bursting in like unwelcome sunshine, oblivious to the inescapable dread tightening around him. Their voices were a dull roar beneath the oppressive hum of the flickering lights. Henrique said nothing, his voice caught in the narrowing throat of unease. Later that night, in the dim confines of his apartment overlooking the rain-soaked streets, the silence shattered with the subtle drip of running water, a faucet left open somewhere in the depths of the building's plumbing. The sound was sterile and hollow, but carried with it the weight of something unseen yet urgent. He followed it, each step absorbing the wet chill that clung not only to the air but to his very skin. The bathroom was wrapped in a blanket of steam, the mirror entirely fobbed over. As he reached out and wiped away the mist, his reflection stared back, but empty, terrifying. His own eyes vanished, leaving nothing but 2 abyssal black holes where they should be. Henrique recoiled, heart hammering, the cold sweat of dread pooling at his temples. The silence shattered again, this time by the shrill hiss of his phone. On the other end, a rasp like dry leaves scraping against stone. He's looking for yours. Over the next days, Henrique's reality fractured. Shadows morphed at the edges of every reflective surface, windows gleaming wet from the evening fog, glass shop fronts slick with condensation, even the screen of his phone seeming to pulse alive. Always the same figure appeared. That pale, eyeless man, his presence a growing weight on Henrique's spine. Each time Henrique blinked, the apparition was closer than before, a creeping invasion rearranging the space around him, as if the city itself conspired against his sanity. Claustrophobia and cold crept inward, wrapping around his consciousness, suffocating like dense seaweed beneath dark waters. The relentless tapping of unseen waves echoed behind his pulses, a synchronized heartbeat matching his own unraveling mind. Fear bled through skin and bone, and the line between hunter and hunted blurred. A week later, Henrique did not arrive for his internship. The police forced entry into his apartment, greeted instead by the suffocating scent of salt and damp plaster. There, in the small bathroom, he lay collapsed on the floor, the skin pale and shriveled as though soaked in the ocean's depths. His face, the harrowing detail they could never unsee, was a vacant mask, eye sockets hollow as the grave. On the mirror, traced by trembling, wet fingers, the final chilling message shimmered under cold fluorescent light. "Now I can see." The words pulsed with a darkness deeper than night, echoing the empty gaze of the drowned man, as if the very air in the room had shifted to stare back, hungry, alive, and relentless. Dare to peer into the depths where sight and madness blur. Discover more unsettling tales, and embrace the shadows that hide just beneath the surface. When the tempest rages outside, Kaio's solitude is shattered by a presence that writes its own sinister tale. But will he remain the author of his own fate? rain pelted the sprawling skyline of Sao Paulo, each drop a tiny drumbeat against the window pane of Caio's cramped apartment. Lightning fractured the night, blinding white forks slashing the thick black sky, illuminating the sparse room with jerking pulses of light. Somewhere beyond, thunder rumbled, a low, distant growl that resonated beneath the cold floorboards. Caio sat hunched at his battered desk, pale fingers poised over the keyboard, shoulders tight beneath a threadbare sweater. The apartment smelled faintly of damp plaster and old paper, the musty scent curling in the stagnant air. For weeks, the writer had locked himself away, tapping out stories into the smallest hours, his breath rising in white curtains in the cold room. Yet tonight, the usual solace warped. The shadows seemed thicker, heavier, gathering in the corners like swallowing creatures. In the far corner stood the relic, the armchair, inherited from his grandmother, its worn leather cracked and sagging. By day it was quiet, unremarkable. But when darkness bled through the city streets and the storm clawed at glass and stone, it creaked as if alive, an unspoken witness with presence and weight. Tonight, Caio felt the chair's gaze like a pulse against his skin, a presence settling there, intangible, yet unnervingly real. The overhead lamp flickered, a sputtering dance of light and shadow that cut through the gloom around Caio's desk. His heartbeat jumped, sharp, erratic. He chastised himself. The storm's interference, old wiring, nothing more. Yet the air had thickened, warm yet chill, as if the rain brought something heavier inside. A scent of wet earth turned sour. He stopped typing, eyes flicking toward the rain-streaked window. The glass blurred with moisture, but a shape steadied behind him, a silhouette taller than any ordinary man, broad shoulders draped in an ancient, sodden coat. The outline was unnervingly still, its head cocked, watching, weighing, his breath lodged in his throat. Whispers of cold seeped into his bones. When he spun slowly, heart hammering against ribs, the room was empty, a hollow echo of footsteps in the dark. But the reflection remained, the shadow steeped in ink-black darkness, unlike the pale reflection of light on glass. It stretched longer, unmoving. Outside, the rain dimmed, muted, as if a thick, invisible quilt was drawn tight over the world, each drop fallen into silence. The atmosphere clotted, heavy and oppressive, bearing down on Caio's chest. Then, a creak, the chair in the corner, the old leather shifting with a tortured groan. The sound sliced through the silence like a fingernail on slate. Caio didn't look. He held his breath, felt the room pulse with the stilled rhythm of his heart. Each shallow inhale prickled the back of his neck with icy heat. From the corner of his eye, the black form glided, no footsteps, no sound, until it hovered beside him, impossible and close enough to touch, yet utterly intangible. It was a void, a smothering shade with no face, no light to catch eyes, just a hollow, enveloping darkness, a black hole bleeding cold into the warm apartment. The computer screen flickered erratically, the glow dimming and brightening under the shadow's unseen hand. Words blinked out, then reformed into a chilling message. Now it's my turn to tell the story. The shadow leaned closer, darkness swirling inward like a breath drawn long and slow. Caio felt the absence of warmth, a frigid draft, sharp and biting, gnawing at his skin. It whispered, voice sinking beneath sound and into thought, a low vibration vibrating inside his skull. Keep writing. Resistance drowned beneath the flood of icy command. His fingers moved, tapping out words that did not originate in his mind. Dark tales of blood and secrets unfolded under the shadow's influence. Murders carved from nightmare, betrayals coded in decay, voices whispered in dead languages only the darkness knew. Hours unfolded like a slow, suffocating shroud. Eyes stinging with exhaustion, Caio's body slumped forward. He awoke cocooned in the armchair's tight embrace, leather cool and strangely dry against his sweat-damp skin. The room lay still, silent except for the steady, muffled sigh of rain outside. The open screen glowed softly, cursor blinking over the line that froze his blood. Next chapter, you. He glanced down. Wet footprints marred the cold floor, leading, beckoning, dragging away from the chair and toward the empty bed. The rainy night outside had deepened into something darker still, shadows twisting, the armchair's weight pressing into the room, and Caio was left to wonder if he was still the storyteller, or the story itself, written and rewritten by a darkness that never left. The room hummed with the scent of wet leather and shadow, a lingering echo of a tale told and retold, curled tightly around the seats of his own fear. Dare to unravel the shadows with Caio. Step into the chilling swirl where stories live and breathe, waiting to consume their authors. Download the full tale and feel the darkness whisper your name.